Welcome back to Ron's Radio Corner. Lately in the news, there has been constant coverage about the wildfires out in California and just how devastating those wildfires have been. There are people who have lost everything. There are towns that practically no longer exist. Infrastructure which has been destroyed and will take, I imagine, months, if not longer, to ever be fully put back in place. And somewhere in my head popped the thought of what role has radio been playing in keeping people on the West Coast dealing with these wildfires sort of up to date, have provided them with news coverage. And I'm on the East Coast, so I'm not dealing with this personally, but it does make you wonder what you would do in a situation where there was some sort of uncontrollable force that was impacting you, and it could be, we normally think about the ideas of bad storms, blizzards, hurricanes, depending on where you are, tornadoes, flooding, California and other parts of the country, wildfires and earthquakes are a very real thing. And a lot of these people have literally had to evacuate their homes last minute, throw together whatever they could throw together as quickly as possible. And I wondered, what role has radio been playing in this? And I've done a little bit of reading and saw some articles, but there's one that I just kind of grabbed and wanted to sort of read a piece of it here. This is from Inside Radio, because I don't want to not give credit to the source, but the article is KFI Los Angeles provides round-the-clock coverage of wildfire battles. And here's a paragraph I want to read, maybe two paragraphs. KFI has been in wall-to-wall coverage, which will continue until further notice. Tim Conway Jr. and Neil Savadra handled most of the overnight coverage with reports from Barry live in the studio. And then there's a quote here. A lot of these listeners did not have electricity in the middle of the night. There were 400,000 people without power, so they didn't have the internet. Cell phone service was spotty, but they had a radio, Barry explains. This reinforces the importance of radio during breaking news. It really is a lifeline, providing vital information to our listeners and listeners to other stations that were live overnight. Unfortunately, I think we tend to think of radio in these sort of moments, and we listen to a lot of our news coverage and our music, along with podcasts and all these other things, in different mediums than traditional broadcast radio. But if you were in the situation that a lot of the folks, at least I imagine a lot of the folks in the areas these fires are going through, if you had to suddenly, throw together your most basic of belongings and evacuate your home, or you're stuck in your home, but you're now without power, and cell phone service is spotty, what do you do? So, I just can't help but think that this is sort of just a really real life happening right now example of why radio is important. And I think if you were someone who had to evacuate quickly, any one of these emergency radios, and I've thrown a few of them on the table, any one of these emergency radios is something that you would probably want to have on hand, be able to throw in the car, or throw in a backpack, throw in whatever suitcase or duffel bag you're grabbing as you run out the door, so that you can stay up to date, to have some sort of lifeline to the outside world, some means of staying in the loop of what's going on. And this isn't really a video where I'm going to go into the pros and cons of all these radios, or at least that's not my intention. But certainly with the emergency radios, what you get is that idea of it can be powered multiple ways, right? This one's got an internal battery, but it's got the hand crank on the back of it, and it's just a basic AM/FM radio. When you get a little more sophisticated, like the two C crane radios here, or this Cato here, with the two C crane radios, it's AM/FM. There's solar on both of these. You have the hand crank. Both have internal batteries and also run on AA batteries. And personally, I think this is really what you want in an emergency radio. You want something that in a pinch you can power it as many ways as possible. Right? Solar panel to help charge up the internal battery. The hand crank, if you really had to go that route. I like radios that run on AA's, because I think AA's are something that most of us probably have. If we don't have them kicking around in a drawer someplace, we probably have some we could scavenge out of a remote or something in a pinch. The Cato Voyager throws in shortwave into the mix, and whether or not that's a big benefit, I think probably doesn't hurt. And personally, I think all three of these radios are really nice, solid radios that sound decent and do a pretty good job at picking up. Just they're sensitive. They can definitely pull in quite a few stations. But I think in a real pinch, just the basic radio, and of course the XH Data D219 is a great shortwave radio. It's not just an AM/FM radio, but it's a really inexpensive radio that runs on AA's, and in a pinch could be easily thrown into a duffel bag, or heck, you could put it in a coat pocket, or or keep one in the glove box of your car, with a couple of batteries, sitting in a Ziploc alongside of it. And I don't particularly think, I do like the Wen Pezare or the Wenzare, or I do like this radio, the Y706, and it's AM/FM, and it does have shortwave, and I think for the idea of having something that I could quickly throw, I'd rather have this one. But if you have this on hand, this is a radio you could easily toss into into a duffel bag or something and go. Of course, this one runs on AAA's. Way in the back there, I have the C Crane EP Pro, and I have my GE Super Radio 3. Now, they don't make the GE Super Radio 3 anymore, and haven't for a long time. What I think those radios represent is just the idea that they're very good at pulling in stations, and they run on D batteries. Both can also run on electricity. The EP Pro, it's an adapter. The GE, it's got a line cord built into it, but I run these on D batteries, and they run a very long time on D batteries. So yeah, it's not light. They're not light portable radios that you might throw into a backpack and take with you. I think you'd be better served maybe with the Voyager, or one of the C Crane emergency radios. But it is a radio that if you had one of these, it's almost a great radio to have. Well, it is a great radio to have in the house. It's the base station radio. Power goes out. You've got this radio on, to on standby. You got some D batteries, hopefully in it because you've used it enough. You got some D batteries that you've kept near it, or that where you can grab them in case suddenly you lose power and you need some way to connect to the outside world, and you don't have to worry about listening to that radio for a while, because that on D batteries, they're going to last quite a long time. And even if you had to go somewhere quick, if you're hopping in your car or something, it's not impossible to take one of these with you. So, again, I think the purpose of this video, if there is a purpose, is just I'm watching all this news coverage, and they're talking about this really devastating event going on, and I can only imagine what it must be like to be in a situation where you feel cut off from the world, because everything that the landscape around you is literally changing. You've lost electricity. You're trying to use your cell phone and you can't. But the simple, humble radio still works. And I came across another article that talked about some of the really heroic efforts that these radio stations are doing, or not just the radio stations. I mean, I don't want to but to keep the radio stations up and running. These broadcast towers, some of these towers are in areas that are vulnerable, and they're running on generators, and there's been all sorts of efforts to even preparing before an event to make sure that these towers would remain up and running. So I think it hammers home the importance of radio in a really, when you're in a really critical time, when you're faced with a major catastrophe or event. That ability for radio to sort of keep you connected, not even sort of, for that radio to keep you connected. And like I said, I think one of the things I've said before is I think the challenge is, how do we make sure radio stays viable when we're not in those emergency times? And that is the challenge, right? If we simply think of radio as something to turn to in that moment when we need it, it might not be there if that's the only time we're returning toward it. It needs to be a viable entity. And then you look specifically about the article that I was reading from. This is KFI Los Angeles. This is 640 on the AM dial. This is an AM station, and there's drawbacks to AM. The sound quality of FM is much better, or can be much better, but AM transmits much further. So so here is there's all sorts of conversations about AM radio being sort of like our emergency lifeline. But again, it's really tough. How do you keep AM viable so people will listen to it during those times where it's not a catastrophe and not an emergency event? But all I can say is, if you are out there on the West Coast and you are dealing with this horrible devastation, my hopes and thoughts are with you that you get through this okay. It's kind of tough to talk about this and not realize that there are people who are really, really impacted, by the loss and devastation that's going on. I would like to know, if you're someone who's been through some sort of catastrophe, if if radio was your lifeline to stay connected. So I guess I'll just sort of wrap this up by saying, if you're watching what's going on, if you're in an area where occasionally you have to worry about, blizzards, hurricanes, tornadoes, earthquakes, wildfires, and you don't own a radio, you're probably not watching this video, but if you don't own a radio, why not? And maybe you should consider one, or should you consider one? I'll throw it out that way. So, thanks for watching.